The first time I heard it, it didn't even sound real. You know she's pregnant, right? Has been for a while now. Way before they even got engaged. Those words didn't flip my world upside down, they flipped his. The same man who tossed 7 years of marriage into the trash like it was an old receipt. The same man who never had time for my tears, my questions, my late night can we please talk moments. Now my phone wouldn't stop lighting up with his name, over and over, like panic had finally taught him persistence. I stared at the screen and waited for the familiar punch of emotion. Nothing came. My name is Madison, and I'm 31 years old. 3 months ago, my divorce from Brandon became official, with signatures, stamps, and the cold finality of a judge's calendar. I met him when I was 22 at a friend's birthday party in Louisville, Kentucky, where we both grew up. He had this easy confidence, this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. I fell for it fast. I fell for him faster. And for a long time, I thought that meant something. 6 weeks after those papers were finalized, I packed what was mine and left Louisville behind. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, into a small apartment flooded with daylight, tucked on a quiet street where nobody knew my history. That was the point. I needed space where Brandon's shadow didn't reach every grocery store aisle, every restaurant patio, every corner where I might run into someone who knew the story and would tilt their head like they were studying a bruise. Back home, everything had turned into a reminder of what I'd lost and how I'd lost it. The truth came out in the most embarrassing, predictable way. Not a private investigator, not a dramatic confession, not a friend catching him in public. A text message. One glowing sentence that landed in my lap while he was in the shower, and I was sitting at the edge of our bed waiting for our old Friday night routine that had already been dying for years. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I miss you already. I didn't go searching for it, it came to me. Like the universe got tired of watching me make excuses. When I confronted him, he didn't even pretend. He didn't stutter or scramble or swear it wasn't what it looked like. He looked at me with something that felt like relief, like I'd finally taken a burden off his shoulders. And then he said the words that cut deeper than the affair itself. He told me he hadn't been happy for years. That she understood him in ways I never could. That I'd become predictable. That I was boring. That he'd outgrown me. It's a special kind of cruelty when someone rewrites your whole marriage like it was an outdated phase they're embarrassed to admit they ever had. I filed the next week. The divorce moved fast, almost too fast. He wanted out so badly he agreed to whatever made it quicker. He kept the house we bought 3 years earlier, the one with the wraparound porch and the garden I planted with my own hands. I took my car, my savings, and the little shred of dignity I could still hold without it slipping through my fingers. I transferred within my company, Larks & Finch, a mid-sized interior design firm where I'd worked for 5 years as a project coordinator. The Charlotte office was smaller, but it felt like a clean slate. A place where I could be Madison again, not Brandon's wife, not the one he left. The first weeks were ugly. I'd come home and sit among half-opened boxes I couldn't bring myself to unpack, staring at blank walls like they had answers. The quiet was heavy. There were nights it felt like the silence had hands, like it could press against my chest until I couldn't breathe. Then, little by little, something started to shift. I remembered the woman I was before I learned to shrink. I remembered wanting things, real things, that had nothing to do with keeping a man happy. I started taking my work seriously again, not as a distraction but as proof I still existed. I started sleeping. Without waking up in a panic. I started laughing at small things, and the laughter didn't feel borrowed. I found out about Brandon's engagement the way everybody finds out things they didn't ask to know, through social media and an algorithm that loves pain. A mutual friend commented, "Congratulations," and suddenly there it was on my screen, like a slap disguised as a life update. 3 months after our divorce. It should have hurt more than it did, but by then I'd already figured out what I didn't want to admit at the time. Their relationship didn't start after me, it was built during me. While I was still trying to fix a marriage he'd already abandoned. I heard the rehearsal dinner was happening that night because Chloe mentioned it on a call earlier in the week. Chloe had always tried to stay neutral, caught in the middle since college, holding on to both friendships like she could keep the whole thing from bleeding onto her hands. She told me the wedding was planned for the next afternoon, some upscale place downtown, expensive and polished, like money could cover a messy beginning. That night, I was in my living room with a glass of wine and a book I wasn't really reading. I felt strangely detached, like Brandon's life had turned into a movie I used to watch but no longer cared about. I was starting to feel normal again. I was starting to feel like myself. Then the calls started. The first one came just before 9. When I saw his name, I assumed it was an accident, a butt dial, a weird glitch. We hadn't spoken since the divorce became official, and even then it was cold, transactional. He called to confirm paperwork, not to apologize, not to ask if I was okay, not to acknowledge what he'd done. I let it ring out. Then he called again. And again. And again. By the time my phone had lit up 8 times in less than 10 minutes, my stomach tightened in a way it hadn't in weeks. Brandon wasn't persistent. Brandon was avoidant. During our marriage, I was the one who chased every conversation, every repair, every attempt at closeness. He would pull away and I would follow, until I learned to pretend I didn't notice the distance. I turned my phone face down and tried to focus on the page in front of me, but my mind drifted back through the slow death of our marriage. The business trips that kept stretching longer. The late nights that didn't add up. The way he'd flinch when I touched him, like affection was an inconvenience. The subtle way he'd make every problem sound like my fault. Too emotional. Too needy. Too dramatic. I had sanded myself down for him, piece by piece, until there wasn't much left. And now, on the eve of his wedding to the woman he cheated with, he was calling like the world was ending. I went to bed without answering. In the morning, my phone showed 23 missed calls and 14 voicemails. I made coffee first, because whatever crisis he had found was not more important than my peace. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. Not curious like I cared, curious like you slow down for a car crash you never wanted to see but can't ignore. Around noon, my phone rang again, and this time it wasn't him. It was Chloe. I answered, and before I could even say hello, she rushed out the words like they were burning her tongue. Madison, you're not going to believe what happened last night. My grip tightened. What happened? There was a pause, and I could hear her swallowing, like she knew she was about to drop something heavy. Someone made a toast, she said, voice low, almost stunned. Brandon's cousin, Aaron. He was drunk, like always. And he joked about them being great parents, and then he asked when the baby was due. He said it like everybody already knew. My blood went cold, not because I missed Brandon, but because the timeline snapped into place so cleanly it made me feel sick. She's pregnant? I asked, even though I already knew what was coming next. Chloe exhaled shakily. Yeah. And Madison, they started doing the math. Out loud. Right there at the table. And right then, I understood why Brandon had been calling like a man being chased. Chloe kept talking, her voice a mix of shock and that guilty excitement people get when they're watching something implode in real time. It wasn't just that she's pregnant, she said. It's that she's been pregnant for months. Way before the engagement. Way before anyone thought. People started whispering, and then it turned into that kind of silence where you can hear forks hit plates, and then it got worse because Aaron didn't even realize what he'd done. He just kept smiling like he'd said something sweet. I sat down at my kitchen table like my legs had decided for me. How far along? I asked. Chloe hesitated. Madison, she's not, a little pregnant. She's showing. She's clearly not just a few months. And when people started counting backward, it got real ugly, real fast. Because it means she was pregnant while you two were still married. Not maybe. Not possibly. It's obvious. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of my refrigerator. The sunlight through my window suddenly felt too bright, like it was exposing something I didn't want to look at. I didn't feel heartbreak. That part of me had already been wrung out. What I felt was this sharp, clean clarity, like a lock clicking into place. The rush. The engagement 3 months after my divorce. The wedding right on its heels. It wasn't romance. It was damage control. It was trying to make the timeline look nicer, cleaner, more acceptable. A story they could sell to their families, to social media, to everyone who would judge them. And now, at the rehearsal dinner, the truth had slipped out of someone's mouth by accident. Chloe said my name again, softer this time. "Are you okay?" I stared at the coffee cup in front of me like it had answers. "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it in a way that surprised even me. I didn't know. I didn't know it was that deep. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have called you with this. But when I saw him last night, Madison, I swear, he looked like he was going to throw up." Vanessa started crying. Her mom was glaring at everyone like we were the ones who did something wrong. And Brandon kept disappearing, like he needed air, like he didn't know where to put his hands. So he didn't know. That was the part that landed the hardest. Not because it made me feel sorry for him. Because it proved something else. It proved he wasn't just a villain who carefully controlled every single move. He was also a man who jumped off cliffs for thrills, then looked around mid-fall and realized he didn't know how deep the drop was. I thanked Chloe and ended the call. My hands were steady, but my mind was moving too fast, like it had been turned loose after months of being trapped. Then my phone buzzed again. Brandon. He didn't call this time. He texted. "I need to talk to you urgently. Please. Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It almost made me laugh. For 7 years, I'd begged for 5 minutes of real honesty. 5 minutes where he looked at me like I mattered. 5 minutes without a screen in his hand, without a sigh that made me feel like I was annoying him. 5 minutes where he didn't act like my feelings were some messy chore. And now he needed 5 minutes, like I was supposed to drop everything and run. I stared at the message, and I felt that old muscle twitch, the one that wanted to soothe, to fix, to calm the storm. A reflex I'd trained into my body for years. Then I remembered the nights I cried alone because he'd walked out of the room. I remembered the way he'd laughed when I suggested counseling. I remembered the way he'd told me I was boring, as if love was supposed to be entertainment. I typed back, slow and deliberate. "What do you want, Brandon?" The reply came instantly, like he'd been holding his breath. "Can I call you? Please. I'm losing my mind. I need someone who will be honest with me." I stared at that line for a long time. Honest. He wanted honesty the way a drowning man wants air. Not because he respects it, but because he's finally suffering without it. I should have ignored him. I had every right. But curiosity had teeth, and it sank into me. So when his name flashed across my screen again, I answered. "Madison," he said, and his voice didn't sound like the man who once walked into a room and owned it. It sounded raw, like someone had scraped all the polish off him. "Thank God. I didn't think you'd pick up." "You have 5 minutes," I said, and I meant it. He exhaled hard. "You heard. Chloe called," I said. "I heard. It's worse," he said quickly, like he couldn't stand the pause. "It's worse than what you think." I leaned back in my chair. "Then say it." He swallowed, and I could hear it, that little desperate sound people make when they're trying not to crack. She told me the baby was conceived in March. After the divorce. She swore that. She swore it. But last night, when Aaron said what he said, and when people started talking, I confronted her. I felt my stomach tighten. "And she admitted it," he said, voice breaking on the edge. "She's been pregnant since November." November. That word sat heavy in my chest. Not because I missed him. Because I was still married in November. Because I was still sleeping next to him, still trying to fix what he had already decided to ruin. And while I was doing that, his other life was already growing inside someone else. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. My voice came out calm. "So you're calling me because you're realizing the timeline makes you look even worse?" "No," he said fast. "No, Madison, I don't care how I look. I mean, I do, but that's not why I'm calling." There was another pause, longer this time. Then he said it. "I don't know if the baby is mine." I closed my eyes, and for a second, I just let that hang in the air. Of course that was it. That was the real panic. Not the scandal, not the guests whispering, not the venue and the money and the embarrassment. The terror that the whole thing might have been built on a lie that didn't even include him the way he thought it did. "Is that what you want from me?" I asked quietly. "You want me to tell you whether she was sleeping with you while we were married?" He made a sound that wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Then he said, "I need to know, did you ever suspect it was going on longer than I admitted? Did you ever think there was more?" I laughed once, short and sharp, because the irony was almost insulting. "Brandon," I said, "I suspected everything. I just didn't have proof. And every time my gut screamed, you made me feel crazy for listening to it." He went silent, like the truth had slapped him. "I know," he whispered. "I know I did that." And then, as if the dam finally broke, he started talking, spilling the whole mess into my ear like I was still his wife, like I was still the woman who held his world together. He told me about the confrontation after the rehearsal dinner. About Vanessa crying. About her trying to insist Aaron was confused. About him pushing until she couldn't hold the lie anymore. "She admitted she timed it," he said. "She told me she knew if she told me earlier, I might back out. So she waited until everything with you was already blowing up, so I'd be, I don't know, committed. Locked in." I stared at the wall in front of me, feeling something dark twist in my stomach. That wasn't love. That was strategy. "She used the pregnancy," he said, voice shaking. "Like insurance." My fingers tightened around the phone. "And the father?" He hesitated again. "She was seeing someone else," he finally said. "Back then. Around the same time. A guy from work. I didn't know until last night. She said she ended it, but," his voice dropped. "She says she's almost sure it's mine, but she can't be 100%. My heartbeat stayed steady, and that was the strangest part. I felt like I was listening to a story about strangers, not my own past. "The wedding is in 3 hours, Brandon said suddenly, panic rushing back in. "Everyone's here. Our families, her family, my parents, everybody. We spent so much money, Madison. I don't know what to do." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're still thinking about going through with it," I said. "I don't know," he snapped, then immediately softened, like he realized who he was talking to. "I don't know. I feel trapped." "You're calling the wrong person," I said. "You trapped me for years in a marriage where I was the only one trying. You don't get to make me responsible for your escape plan now." "I'm not trying to make you responsible," he said quickly. You're the only person who will be honest with me." I let out a slow breath. "And you think I'm not biased?" "I know you are," he whispered. "But you also see things clearly. You always did." That line hit me in a place I didn't want touched. Because it was true. I had seen. I had sensed. I had noticed all the cracks. And I spent years letting him convince me they weren't there. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "That you should marry her because you're embarrassed? That you should walk away because she lied? I can't decide that for you, Brandon." Then he asked the question that told me everything about him. "Do you think she loves me?" I stared out the window at a neighbor walking their dog like the world was normal. "Brandon," I said, "she lied to you about a child. About the timeline. About another man. If she can lie about that, what do you think she'll do when life gets hard? When you're tired, when you're stressed, when the baby is screaming at 3 in the morning? Love doesn't need that much manipulation to survive." Silence. Then, barely audible, "I don't think I can do this." I didn't comfort him. I didn't tell him he'd be okay. I didn't offer a solution. I said, "Then don't." The call ended a few minutes later, and I put my phone down like it was heavy. An hour passed. I tried to go back to my day. I tried to wash a plate, wipe a counter, do something normal. But my body stayed alert, like it was waiting for the next tremor. Then he called again. I answered because I already knew I wouldn't breathe easy until I heard the outcome. "I'm not going through with it," he said immediately, voice steadier now, like he'd crossed a line and couldn't uncross it. "I just told her it's cancelled." I sat down again, slow. "How did she take it?" I asked. He gave a humorless laugh. Her mom is screaming. Her dad is threatening to sue me. Vanessa's hysterical. Like full meltdown. But I don't care. I can't marry someone I don't trust. And I'm not raising a child without knowing the truth. There was a beat where I almost expected myself to feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt empty in a clean way, like something old had finally stopped leaking. I'm glad you did what you needed to do, I said carefully. But listen to me, Brandon. This does not change anything between us. You still cheated. You still lied. You still crushed me and walked away. I'm not your safe place. Not anymore. I know, he said quickly. I know. I'm not calling because I think we can. I'm not that stupid. Then he said the word I waited years to hear. I'm sorry. And for a second, it hung there, strange and late, like flowers delivered to the wrong funeral. I'm listening, I said, because part of me needed to hear him say it right, not for him, for me. I was wrong, he said. All of it. The affair, the way I treated you, the way I made you doubt yourself. I told myself our marriage was dead, but I killed it. I checked out. I took you for granted. I wanted excitement, and I convinced myself that meant I deserved to blow up my life. My eyes stung, and I hated that they did. Because even now, even after everything, my body still remembered loving him. He kept talking, softer now, like he was confessing to a version of himself he didn't want to meet. I thought Vanessa felt special, he said. But it wasn't her. It was the newness. The secrecy. The thrill. And now I see what I threw away. I let him finish. Then I said the only truth that mattered. Your apology doesn't erase what you did. I accept that you said it. But it doesn't rewrite my past. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I needed you to know I finally see it. I could hear chaos behind him, voices raised, someone crying, a door slamming. His world was burning down and he was calling me like I still had a role in it. I didn't. It sounds like you have things to handle, I said. I'm going to go. Wait, he said quickly. One more thing. I closed my eyes. What? If things calm down, he said, voice careful, would you meet me for coffee sometime? Just to talk. Not to get back together. I owe you more than a phone call. I pictured my apartment, my quiet mornings, my new routines, the life I was building that didn't include him. I pictured what it would feel like to invite his energy back in, even for an hour. No, I said, gentle but firm. That wouldn't be good for me. I wish you well, Brandon. But I'm not part of your journey anymore. Then I ended the call. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. I watched his name flash, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel pulled. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel responsible. I blocked his number. And in that moment, I realized something that surprised me with how calm it felt. The revenge I used to imagine, the dramatic moment where he suffers and I smile, it wasn't even necessary. Because the real win was this. I didn't need him to fall apart for me to be okay. I was okay because I finally chose myself.